In this parsha, it's talk about the dream. So Rashi says, in the dream, he saw Malach Elikim, Oilam Veyordim. Every Rashi, every single Rashi, is coming to answer a question that a child might ask in Pshuta Shemikra, straightforward thinking, logic, not a pilpul, straightforward thinking. And they say when the Heilige Ruzhina was a little boy, he was a brilliant kid. And every time they learned a pasuk, they finished the pasuk, he'd pick up his hand. Rabbi, I have a question. What's the question? He would say his question. That was exactly the question Rashi coming to answer. It was always the same thing. They finish a pasuk, little boy pick up his hand. Rabbi, I have a question. What's the question? He would say his question. That's exactly the question Rashi is coming to answer. Rashi never tells you his question. He always tells you the answer. If Rashi tells you a question, you know he's answering a question with a question. Sometimes Rashi has a question. That's not the real question. There's another question that he's asking. So here they learn the pasuk and the dream of Yaakov. Hinei malach elakim olam v'yardim boi. There's an obvious question here. Angels, where do they come from? From heaven. So if you see angels,
you gotta come down
they got to come down and then they go up. So how could you say olam v'yardim? First they go up and then they come down. So Rashi answers that there was special malachim that would accompany Yaakov Avinu in Eretz Yisrael, but when he was about to go over the border, so they went up, and the malachi chutz le'aretz yardim, they came down. But they learned the pasuk, and the Rebbe says, "No, Yisraelik, you no question." I have no question. No, nothing odd in the pasuk. I said, no question. You know, there's nothing obvious. So the boy says, "Was avacholim frekt man nicht kein kashes." It's a dream. You ask no questions on a dream. It's a silly dream. It's going up. It's coming down. Wow. You know, you never saw an elephant flying in the dream. Rebbe told the story. Every Rashi.
This was different malachim.
Yeah,
not the ones from the dream. Not from the elephant flying. But
so he missed one. That's the truth.
Huh?
The medrash that these were the malachim.
Right. That's what Rashi says.
That destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah.
Oh, that's a different thing. But the Rashi says that. But the Rebbe has, and this year we're focusing on the beautiful approach that the Rebbe has to Pirush Rashi, and this is one of these a classic of where the Rebbe opens up a window to show us how to take apart a Rashi, and through this how to understand a pasuk in the Chumash. First pasuk in this week's parsha, Veyetzey. Veyetzey Yaakov Be'ersheva Vayelech Harona. He went out of Be'ersheva and he came to Choron. Yaakov left Be'ersheva and he went towards Choron. Vayifka b'mokem vayolon shan. He reached the place and he spent the night there. Okay. Rashi Vayeitzei al yedei shebishvil sheroz b'nois Knan be'eni Yitzchak aviv holach Esav al Yishmael hifsek inyim b'parshios shel Yaakov. Since it was due to the fact that Esav saw that the daughters of Canaan were bad in the eyes of his father, so he said, just like my father sent my brother away, he sent him out of town to get a good girl, I'm also going to go out of town and get a good girl. I'm going to do one over. I'm going to get a Yocheses, the daughter of Yishmael, and that's what he did. And that was the end of last week's parsha. So we were talking all about Yaakov, and then all of a sudden we started talking about, we went off the topic about Esav getting married to Machlas Bas Yishmael. So the Torah wants us to bring us back to topic. So therefore the Torah recaps where we're holding in the story. In other words, what's bothering Rashi? It's bothering Rashi that in the last parsha we already said that Vayelech Padena Aram, that Yitzchak called his son, and he said, my son, I don't want you to stay here. I want you to go to your uncle and find a woman there. And he listened to his father, and he went to Padan Aram, and his brother heard that he listened to his father, and he went to Padan Aram. So he listened to his father. Even his brother knows that he listened to his father. So we know that he went to Padan Aram. So why is the Torah telling us all over again? So Rashi says, really the Torah doesn't have to tell it to us all over again, but that when you tell someone a story, and you say something, agav orcha, parenthetical, you go off the issue, when you come back, you recap. So where were we holding in the story? and then you go back and you continue. So the Torah is like recapping. Oh, we were in the middle of the story about Veyetzey, Yaakov, and Be'eshava, Vayelech. Let's continue from here. Vayivga b'mokim. Okay, let's continue the Rashi. When he finished the account of Esav's marriage, he went back to the previous subject. Okay, next Rashi. Veyetzey, Rashi says, Veyetzey loy hoye tzorich lichte vela vayelech Yaakov Charanam v'lama hiskir Yitziyosoi. It only needs to write, and Yaakov went to Charan. So why then mention his departing?
When Rashi said read the question, Rashi come to answer something?
Oh, it's Rashi. We're going to see soon. Yeah, Rashi is going to say that we'll see soon. The Medrash has a whole pshat here, and Rashi is going to tell you not to read the pasuk like the Medrash. Also, Rashi is another thing. Rashi is coming to say here. The truth is, the Rebbe points out, this Rashi is a continuation to the previous Rashi. Sometimes the Torah tells you a whole story. It's not so shver. The Torah says Yaakov went away from Beersheva and he went to Choron. It's not that bad. Maybe if you come in Halacha and the Gemara, every word you have to squeeze something out of every word. In Pshuta Shemikra, there's sometimes extra words just to make the story complete. It's not terrible. It's not terrible to say a story incomplete. You know, I could tell you a story and I miss a few words. You'll still know it, but it doesn't make sense. You know, it makes sense to tell you the full story. That's not a problem. But the problem here is we all know that he left his father's house, and we all know he came to his uncle's house. And we know that from previous parsha. The only reason the Torah repeats the story is just to recap, to go back to what we just were talking about earlier. So what do you have to give me the whole long spiel, the sing and dance? Vayeitzei mi Be'eshava, he went out of Be'eshava. Vayelech Harana, he came to Haran. You're just trying to recap the story for me. I know already. We're just trying to go back to where we were holding in this story. So just say Vayelech Harana. Or just Veyetzey Yaakov and Be'esheva. Why this whole sing and dance? You're not telling me that I know this story already. You're just recapping where we're holding. So that's what's bothering Rashi.
But 1 second, doesn't say Yetziato shel Tzadik Oshem?
Oh, so you got a good answer. Rashi has the same thought. Ella Magid. But this tells us, the Torah doesn't want to teach you about Yaakov. It wants to teach you a very important lesson. It wants to teach you that the departure of a tzaddik from his place makes an impression. Shebizman tzaddik ba'ir, while a tzaddik is in the city. Hu hoida, hu ziva, hu adora. He is the hoid, the ziv, and the hadar of the city. Yatsa misham, once he left there, pana hoida, pana ziva, pana adora, goes away the hoid, the ziv, and the hadar. V'chein, and similarly to this, we find in the story of Rus, it says vayeitzei min hamokim, and she left the place. And that's the story of Naomi and Ruth. So also over there, it's the same question. Let's look at the pasuk. It says in pasuk 6 in Perek Aleph of Rus, it says Vatokim hi v'chaloiseh Vatoshev in source 2, number 2. Vatoshev hi v'chaloiseh, Vatoshev hi v'chaloiseh. Her and her daughter-in-laws stood up. Vatokim hi v'chaloiseh. They stood up. Vatoshev mizdei Moav, and they went back from the field of Moav. Kishama mizdei Moav kifakad Hashem asam elosasam lochem. They heard that the famine in Israel finished, and now God blessed them with bread. So they stood up and they left from the country of Moav. Next pasuk, Vateitzem min hamokim asher hois Hashem. She went out of the place. What do you mean she went out of the place? It's redundant. We just said in the previous pasuk. She went. Vatokim. She stood up. She packed her bags. Her daughter-in-law Vatoshev mizdei Moav. So Rashi says the same question here. Look at Rashi. I underlined it. It says she packed her bags and she came back from the field of Moav. How could she come back to Israel from Moav if she didn't go out of Moav? So the previous pasuk said she came back from Moav. Obviously, she left Moav. So it's redundant. When the tzaddik goes out of the place, it's noticeable. It makes a roishem, pon aziva, pon adora, pon shivcha shalir. V'chein vayeitzei Yaakov be'eshava.
By Naomi, it said after that, but the home kol ha'ir.
Right.
The whole city saw her and they were stunned.
Yeah,
But that's not where they went away from, where they came to. Batiyim Koler was in Israel, not in Moab.
No, when they came back from
When they
Moab
came
to
back
Israel.
in Israel.
Yeah.
Israel was Batiyim
But
Koler.
Yitzchak was still in the year.
Oh, Moira de Kakashi. Very good. Very good. That's what the Medrash asks. What's with Rivka? A chopped liver? And what's with Yaakov? Chopped herring? Yitzchak, Rivka, Tzaddikim are there.
He was blind. He was like inside.
Good.
Good point. 1 second. But let's see what the Medrash says. Let's see what the Medrash says. By the way, we just missed out the last Rashi. Let's go back to, it says, Vayifga mamokim, lo hizkir amokim, I'm sorry, Vayelech harona, yotza laleches lechoran. He left in order to go to Choran. In other words, the Medrash says that, what do you mean, Vayelech harona? So the Medrash says it was a miracle, that the day he left, he had kvitzas haderech. Vayeitzei, vayelech, he came immediately. So Rashi says no. The Rashi Pshuta Shemikra says no. Vayelech Harana means he's on the road to Choran. He didn't arrive that day. He didn't reach that place. And that's why it makes more sense in Pshuta Shemikra that on the way, Vayivga b'makim, on the way, from traveling from Chevron or Beersheva, and he's traveling all the way north, past the border of Israel, today's Israel, into what today is Syria or Iraq, and on the way he passed Yerushalayim. So, because according to the Medrash, it's like Rashi brings later, so you have to say that he traveled from Beersheva. He came to Choram that day, and then he said, "Oh, wait a minute, I didn't stop Yerushalayim," and he traveled back to Yerushalayim. So Rashi says in the Pshuta Shemikra, Vayelech Harana doesn't mean he arrived that day to Choram. Vayelech Harana means Yotza laleches lechoran. He's on the road. I'm traveling to New York. He just got onto the 95 in San Francisco, but he's on the way to New York.
Rashi doesn't take the pshat. It's a dream. In the dream you could say, when he came back, he got off.
No, but he also went to Yeshiva Shem and Ava before he got to Lavan.
Stop in Hebron, some say.
Look in the Medrash. Omer Rabbi Yoshia said, it says in the pasuk, Vayishma Lavi Velima. He listened to his father and his mother. What does it mean, the vayeitzei Yaakov in Beersheva? Ela Omer Rabba said, B'shoshe bikesh lotzes l'chutz la'aretz meheichen hursha loime Beersheva. Yaakov said, well, my father was thinking of going out of chutz la'aretz. He went first to Beersheva. It's not clear where in the pasuk it says that. He went to Geror, and from there the Eibishter said, "Al tira, don't go out Mitzrayim." But okay, maybe Geror is close to Beersheva. And Beersheva is within because he was chased out of Geror, and he moved close to Geror, and he called that city Beersheva. But whatever it is, when Yitzchak was thinking of going out of Eretz Yisrael, he got permission from the Rebbeinu Shalom, or didn't get permission. He spoke to the Rebbeinu Shalom from the city of Beersheva. Afani hoylech l'shah l'Beersheva. I'm also going to travel to Beersheva. Even though it's in Lidashus, if the Eibishter gives me permission at any yoytz, I'm going to go. Demlav, if the Eibishter doesn't give me permission, any yoytz, I'm not going to go. Lefikach, tzorich hekosach lema vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva. Therefore, the pasuk has to say vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva, which is a remarkable medrash. In other words, according to this medrash, that really Yitzchak lived the same place where Avraham Avinu lived. Just like Avraham Avinu lived 25, 26 years in Beersheva, then he lived 25 years in Beersheva, then he had 26 years in Hebron. Really, Yitzchak was living right now in Hebron. And Yitzchak told his son, he was living in Hebron, and he told his son with his father Avraham. Avraham lived in one neighborhood in Hebron. He was saying that he was Tel Rumida, and he was living in Kiryat Arba. And they were living close. They were neighbors of Avraham and Yitzchak. But they both lived in Hebron. And Yitzchak said to Yaakov Avinu, I want you to go to your uncle to find the Shidduch. So Yaakov Avinu said, let me talk to the Shechina. Where am I going to find the Shechina? In Beersheva. So he went and he traveled to Beersheva, and the Eibishter gave him permission to go. And then vayeitzei Yaakov Beersheva vayelech Harana. It's a totally different. This medrash is a totally different understanding on of how things happened here. So Yitzchak is living in the same city that his father lives, and his father passed away, because this father also lived 25 years in Beersheba. Then he lived the rest of his life in Hebron. For 26 years he lived in Hebron. So also Yitzchak lived in Hebron, and he sent Yaakov Avinu to his uncle. But Yaakov decided to first speak to the Shechina, and the Shechina at that time was resting in Beersheba, so he went to Beersheba. That's what the Medrash
goes the opposite way, though.
He's going, yeah, he's going,
way.
he was going
Now,
presumably from, if we know where Beersheba is. So the parshios, it's somewhere
lower.
down, right? So he went from Hebron to Beersheba, and then he went back up, and he stopped Yerushalayim, and then he came to Chora.
It's probably one of the reasons why you're allowed to leave their still to find a way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's so.
Right,
Continue.
It's interesting here. The Rabbi Shalom tells him, goes. He says, my father, he left through Beersheba, so I'm going to do that. If it doesn't work, I'm not going. I mean, like, what is that?
What do you mean the Eibishter told him? Eibishter told him nothing.
What?
His father told him to go find the shidduch by the uncle. So he said, Daddy is great, but let me talk to the Ribono Shel Olam. So let me travel to Beersheba and have a conversation with the Ribono Shel Olam.
Oh, okay, I got it backwards. All right.
Why you have
Next.
to go to Beersheba to make?
Because that's what the Ribono Shel Olam is. At that time,
Wow,
because that was
is
the...
all over.
Okay, well we're waiting to
Maybe
go back to
that was
Yerushalayim
when
Mir
Yeshiva
HaKodesh.
of-
Why do we want Mashiach to take us back to Yerushalayim Mir HaKodesh? The Eibishter is all over.
But wasn't your
At that time, they didn't know yet Yerushalayim
Maybe that
was.
was the word
Now, when he
Yeshiva.
had the dream, all was revealed to him about
Yeah, but
Yerushalayim.
we knew that your son was where the Akedah had.
Okay, good question. But he said that since the last time my father spoke to the Ribono Shel Olam was in Beersheba, I ought to go to
So that was
Beersheba.
the email address.
Yeah. Let's continue.
Nobody
Vayeitzei.
singled out the Akedah at that time. The Akedah, why would they single out the Akedah at that time?
Vayeitzei v'chilo yotza misham. This is the next medrash. That was Ois Hey, and this is Ois Vav. It's both in medrash Rabbi Veyetzey parshios Samaches. The chilo yotza misham Elohu. It says Vayeitzei. He's the only one that left. Varikama chamorim v'chama gemalim yotza. V'atama Vayeitzei Yaakov. It says Vayeitzei singular. Only Yaakov went. When Eliezer went, it went Gemalim, Chamoidim. It was a whole shayara. It was a big group. So why does it say? It say Vayetzu exactly. Plural it should say, not singular Vayeitzei. So the Medrash answers Rabbi Azariah b'Shem Rabbi Yehuda ben Simon Omar b'Zman she'tzadik be'ir. The answer is when the tzaddik is in the city, who ziva hu adora. He's the ziv and the hodder of the city. Yotza misham, when he goes out of there, Ponna Ziva, Ponna Adora goes out to Ziv and the Hodder. With the Kavasei and similar by the story of Rus. Vayeitzei min hamokem asher hoysei shama. Again, it says singular. Vayeitzei, she went out. Chilo yotza min hamokem alehi. Only she went out. She's the only one. L'chayr, it's not true. Harikama chamoirim v'kama gemalim yotzu. They went out with camels. I mean, it's not clear to me who says that they went with camels. I mean, Rashi says clearly in Rus that the camels died and the Chamoidim died, the Machlam, the Chilyan died, and then the husband died. For some reason, the Medrash had a different reading of the story, and according to the Medrash, she did have Chamoidim and she did have Gemalim. So the question is, why does it say singular Vayeitzei? It should say Vayeitzeu. So the answer is Rabbi Azariah b'Shem Rabbi Yehuda b'Simon Rabbi Yochanan b'Shem Rabbi Shmuel bar Yitzchak Gomer Kashatzadik be'ir hu ziva hu adora. He's the ziv and the hodder of the city. Yotza misham, when he goes out of there, Pona ziva Pona adora goes out to ziv and the hodder.
Why they call Naomi Tzaddik when they left Israel? They went
Good question.
Chutz La'aretz, and when everybody dies, she's coming back, so it's not Tzaddik anymore.
Oh, good question.
I was just thinking. Actually,
We'll get to that question.
When you say the Gemalim and the Chamarim, what kind of question? That's irrelevant. It's like say the president went to Chicago. For Steitzach, 100 guys went with him. The Secret Service.
But she had nothing. She left because she had nothing.
Good question.
No.
That's why Rashi doesn't learn. That's why Rashi doesn't say like the Medrash.
So I would say, yeah. I would say like this. That's Ugaret. Everyone understands that. That the main thing is the tzaddik, not all the nuch, the shlachas and all this, right?
Yeah.
So the Medrash is saying, so taka why is the tzaddik the main thing? Because when he leaves, pana ziva, pana hadar. It's this that we don't mention all of these guys that we know ourselves, but maybe you could say like this.
I hear, but still, you see that Rashi doesn't say like the Medrash.
Yeah.
Rashi doesn't say like the Medrash.
Yeah.
Rashi says that the question is not singular and plural.
Yeah.
That it says vayeitzei and it should say vayetzeu.
Yeah.
And the Rashi says a different thing. Rashi says clearly, lo yotzarich lichtav ela vayelech v'lo mehiske yitziasa. Like Shmulik pointed out, why does Rashi have to say the question? Because Rashi is saying my diuk is different than the Medrash. The Medrash says that it says vayeitzei singular, it should say vayetzu plural. I say that Rashi says that's not a diuk.
Yeah.
A man is walking with 100 camels. Who cares about the camels? Like you said, the president is coming to New York. They say in the news. They didn't say the president, 110 Secret Servicemen. Let's negate the Secret Servicemen. They're going to protect the president. But the president is coming to New York. So the same thing here. Rashi says, what's your shaila? Why it says vayeitzei singular? 100 gemalim walked with him? Who cares about 100 gemalim? We care about Yaakov Avinu, not the 100 gemalim. So Rashi says the kasha was not about vayeitzei or vayetzu. The kasha is because it's redundant. Vayeitzei, Yaakov, vayeitzei. We're just trying to get back to the point of the story. Just tell me one of them. Tell me just vayeitzei, Yaakov, or just vayeitzei. Why do you have to repeat yourself? That's what Rashi. It's your petition. Let's the last.
Vayeitzei is one thing and vayelech is one thing.
Right. No, but Rashi says it's double. Why do you need to tell me two things? You're not telling me the story now. You just want to recap, go back to the mice.
Vayeitzei is one.
So that's what Rashi answers. Yeah, vayeitzei, that there was two things that happened. That Yaakov, his goof went to Choron, and also with him, in other words, him and his hoid v'hoder left. Not only he left, also his hoid v'hoder left. Two things left. That's what Rashi says. Let's finish the last three lines here. So zok the medrash. Neched tamon lo yoytze sham elo oisa hatzadekes belvad evel hoch dave zechu dave yitzchak v'rivcha. So the emes is the medrash asks l'chayr it's different. By Rus, no one was left. That's it. But over here, Yitzchak and Rivka stayed in Be'er-Sheva. So what are you talking about? So the answer is, Rabbi Azariah, B'Shem Reb Simon Omar. I'm sorry, the last line is a little shvach in the copy. Lo ydoim zechusoi shel tzadik echad, lezechusoi shel shnei tzadikim, or shloisha tzadikim. That, true, there used to be 3 tzadikim in Be'er-Sheva, now there's only 2 tzadikim, so therefore it makes a big difference.
What's the lotion, if I may ask? The lotion, Yotzu Loleches Lechoron, Vayelech Korona. What is Rashi?
Yeah, I don't want to understand that Rashi. They can on this Rashi, but the previous Rashi. Okay, so the main, well, there's a lot of kashas here. There's a lot of. First of all, you see that Rashi says it in 2 ways. In the Rashi, in the Chumash, Rashi says 3 lashonos: Hoida, Ziva, and Hadar. And when Rashi and Rashi says it in Rus, he says Ziva, Hadara, and Shifcha. And the Medrash just says 2 things. So why is it that the Medrash says 2 things and Rashi says 3 things? And in Rashi's 3 things he changes.
It's a different story, so you can change it. What's the big deal?
He was asleep.
Naomi was with the shift.
He said in both places he says v'chein vayeitzei Yaakov. In both places he compares Yaakov to Rus and he compares Rus to Yaakov. And the bottom line is from here we learned that when a tzaddik leaves from the city it makes a roishim. In one place he says is oiz hodar and hoid, and the other place is oiz hodar and shivcha. Why? Why does it Rashi? It's just that Rashi forgot what he wrote a year ago when he was writing the Chumash. Whatever, he didn't want to go look back. He liked to write 3 lashonas, shivcha, this one, that one. And yeah, it's hard to. He didn't have a computer just to go cut and paste, so he had to write it just to go look at the old manuscript.
He didn't have Google.
Yeah. And the Medrash to go look. The Medrash says 2 lashonas. He tried it to be fancy, but 3 lashonas. And in the Rashi in the Torah, he says everything twice. He says when a tzaddik is in the city. Hu hoida, hu ziva, hu adora. Yotzu misham, pana hoida, pana ziva, pana adora. But Rashi in the Chumash just says one thing. He just says pana ziva, pana adora, pana shivcha. Why all these changes? These are semantics, but the ikar kasha is the kasha the Medrash asks. The big kasha is the kasha the Medrash asks. What do you? And the Rashi doesn't explain himself. He says that when the tzaddik goes away, the glory of the city left. What do you mean that tzaddik goes away, the glory of the city left? What's with Yitzchak? What's with Rivka? And to say that he holds of the teretz of the Medrash, if the Medrash explains it, and Rashi doesn't explain it, obviously he doesn't hold of the Medrash. So what does he hold? So one pshat you could say he holds like the first Medrash. The first Medrash, according to the first Medrash, there's no kasha b'chlal. The first Medrash holds that Yitzchak and Rivka lived in Chevron. If you remember, the first Medrash holds that Yitzchak and Rivka lived in Chevron. And that he went from Chevron to Beersheva to have a conversation to the Rebbeinu Shalom. Like you said, that was the Rebbeinu Shalom's email address. Over there he had a conversation with the Rebbeinu Shalom and then he went. That's not Pshuta Shemikra, because if you learn in Parshas Toilus, it says that when he was kicked out of Geror, he went and he lived in Beersheva. And from the middle of Parshas Toilus, where it says that he lived in Beersheva, it doesn't say that Yitzchak ever moved. So why would we think that Yitzchak is not living now? It doesn't say a word of Chevron at all. In Pshuta Shemikra, it says that he came to, and they made a Shavua there, and that's why they called it Beersheva, and that's it, and he lives there. We never find anywhere in the Chumash till now that Yitzchak moved out of Beersheva. That would not be Pshuta Shemikra at all.
Can be like a summer house. You live in Chevron, but it's a summer house.
Yaakov, you're questioning why it says that, why Rashi's saying that, saying that's the reason why.
Rashi said that the tzaddik left the city.
Yeah.
What do you mean the tzaddik left the city? There's still two tzaddikim left. Yitzchak and Rivka.
No, Yaakov is the subject, not Beersheva. So it's saying the reason, because theoretically, if he was the only tzaddik, that's what would have happened.
But now there is still another two tzaddikim there. So why doesn't he mention something about it?
Why does it who?
Rashi. The Medrash asks.
Because it's talking about why it just says Yaakov. The pasuk focus on Yaakov.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Yotze Hodo, Yotze Zivo, and what's that?
Rashi says when a tzaddik leaves the city.
Yeah, but it's irrelevant.
But Rashi compares it to Rus. How do you compare it to Rus? Rus was a city of Moav. They were Rishoyim. When Rus and Naomi left, that was it. Bingo. Zero tzaddikim were left behind. But when Yaakov left the city, so you're comparing the two stories. How do you compare these two stories?
Because theoretically, if Yitzchak and Rivka were not there, it would have been the same thing. Like I said, Yaakov is the subject, not the place.
Okay. I hear your
answer. The person is the subject, not the makom.
Okay. Well, this is an answer, but there's a little bit. Maybe we can look for another
This
answer.
was in my subconscious every time I read this. This answer.
You see, it bothered you, but you see the question bothered you.
No, but I resolved.
If you had an answer,
I resolved it in my subconscious.
Okay.
Rashi, if you look at Rashi a little later, when it says Yitzchak, why does it say like he's alive? He says, yeah, Yitzchak was already conveyed. He was already old. He was already conveyed. That's why it uses the lashon of Yitzchak.
So it's as if he's not existing.
Mamash is not existing. That's it.
Because Yaakov is the focus of the story. The Chumash has moved on from Yitzchak and Rivka.
Yeah.
Right.
It's focusing on Yaakov's life.
I hear your answer. But it's hard to compare it to. Rashi compares it to the story of Naomi and Rus.
That's only closest for a woman. He says that a woman applies also.
No, but when Rashi says she yitzes a tzaddik min hamokom, that means the tzaddik went out of the mokom, and there's no other tzaddikim. There's two tzaddikim more.
Right.
There was three tzaddikim. Now one tzaddik went out, so everything went out.
Yes, it's a third of them.
There's no order from Yitzchak. There's no zik from Yitzchak.
No, but the place is dead. It's a tzaddikim give the place chayis.
And
so it's not the
But
place.
there's still two more there.
Yitzchak and Rivka are still there.
Right.
So why they're not Ziv and Hodo?
Because the place is not the subject. The place, the tzaddikim give the place chayis.
So
and Rivka and Yitzchak don't give chayis.
He's giving his house.
Yeah, but the subject
Who
is not
says
the
that?
place.
Right.
I'm saying I read somebody locked up in the house.
Right. Rashi says that later.
Right.
Later?
So you're saying a similar thing, but you have to. You're saying a very good point. But l'chaydi he's still a tzaddik. Just because he's locked up in the house doesn't make him always tzaddik.
He's out spreading Torah.
I hear.
But out there.
And Rivka.
You hit on a very good
That's
point.
a good answer for Yitzchak.
That's going to be the Rebbe's teretz, but you have to explain yourself. Another teretz you could say is that Rashi just says oiser roishim, that it only made a little roishim. The Medrash doesn't say oiser roishim.
That's
Rashi only a little roishim. Again, it's a little shver because you compare it to Naomi and Rus, and over there was actually there was no more tzaddikim. And in the Loshen Rashi, Rashi said Magid shetzis Yaakov oiser roishim. Rashi compares it to all the other tzaddikim that leave the city. Shetzis tzaddik min ha'ir oiser roishim. It's mashma that Yaakov's going, and Naomi's leaving, and any tzaddik that leaves the city, even if it's full of so the third pshat that Rebbe gives us like this.
Another question: why you compare it to a story from Naomi? There's another story, a lot of stories. That kind of tzaddik is an Naomi.
Because over there, that's the lotion of the pasuk. We find that the Yetura Dekra over here is Veyetzey Yankiv. It's a Yetura Dekra, and over there also it's a Yetura Dekra because the previous pasuk it's both. It's the same thing. It's a Yetura Dekra. So the Rebbe's third teretz is like this. There's two things in a tzaddik, and this is to your teretz and your teretz, but this is with a husband. There's two levels in a tzaddik. There is the zechus of a tzaddik, and then there is the hashpah of a tzaddik. This is a zechus of a tzaddik. A tzaddik lives in the city. If he has nothing to do with anyone, he's sitting in a basement. There's a big zechus of a tzaddik living in a city. Yeah. The Rebbe said when the Frierdiker Rebbe came to the United States of America, my father-in-law came here, it became a chosh of a city. And that's why when the UN was established, it was because it was a chosh of a city. A tzaddik lived in the city. Right. Yeah, could you imagine? That's the way the Rebbe saw it. Yeah. Then there is that's one. The Rebbe Rashab, when the Bolsheviks started to take hold of Russia, he said, as long as I'm alive, they're not going to have hold of this city to stuff. Kachave. As long as the Rebbe Rashab was alive, the Bolsheviks did not have hold of that city. It was a big city. Today it's a very big destination for vacationers. It's beautiful beaches, and the Bolsheviks could not get hold of Rostov. It was already, he passed away in 1920, but till he died. There was a story that was just told recently when there was change of government. There were groups of soldiers coming in and out. There was the Nikin and Pluta. There was different armies that were trying to take control of the Reds, the Whites. The Yidden suffered from everyone. They suffered the least from the Bolsheviks. The least they suffered from the Bolsheviks. But they suffered terribly from everyone. When the Bolsheviks finally took hold, the Yidden said, they didn't get to breathe more than 30 seconds, and they figured out this wasn't really good. But be it as it may, there was one of the groups of armies that came into the house of the Rebbe Rashab, and they're searching for stuff, and they're making a tumult. So the Rebbe Rashab said, maybe we can tell them they came in with their guns. Maybe someone could tell them to put down their guns. It was a lawless country. They just shoot you in the head. There's no leis din v'leis dayin. So, but a chassid is a chassid. A young man stood up and he went over to the head of the platoon. Yeah, it was Rabbi Lando. It was later the Rav in Bnei Brak for many years. He was a very big friend to all the Gedolei Yisrael. He lived in Bnei Brak. He was established Torah in Bnei Brak. And but that time he was a young man. He was a Talmid Reb Chatmimim. And he went over to the head of the platoon, whatever, the officer in charge. He said, maybe you could put down the guns. He said, okay, guns down. The Rebbe Rashab noticed that one of the soldiers had pocketed a little box of tabak. So the snuff that he used was especially for Pesach. So the Rebbe Rashab gave a krechts. He said that that box that this guy just pocketed is the Pesach tabak. So again, Rabbi Yankel Landa was a young, but he saw that the Rebbe Rashab was bothered by it. So he went again to the captain, whatever it is, the head of the gangsters, and he said someone stole something. The guy got angry, started stealing. He said, "Who stole?" So he pointed to that to the Ganev. And Taka, the soldier, put his hand in his pocket and he put it back on the table. He put it back on the table, but the Rebbe Rashab saw that the box had opened up a little bit. So he said, I don't need it anymore.
Not Pesach anymore.
Yeah, it's not Pesach anymore. This hooligan.
It's in his pocket.
Yeah. When he said that, they already finished the search and they left the house. As soon as they left the house, they heard a bang. They came running out of the house. Right there at the door of the Rebbe Rashab's house, the soldier was lying there dead. When he picked up his gun to go out, accidentally he pushed the thing. He pushed something, and one bullet went straight into his head, and he fell right there. That was it. That made a roshim in the city. So there is the zechus that Rebbe Rashab said, as long as I'm alive, the Bolsheviks are not going to be in the city. Then there is another. There is a tzaddik. The one thing is there's a chus of a tzaddik, and the truth is that we already know that the chus of a tzaddik is megan on a city before Parshas Veyetzey. It's a long parsha. Avraham Avinu has a discussion with the Rebbeinu Shalom. He says, if there is 10 tzaddikim, there's 40 tzaddikim. We know that tzaddikim that live in a city, their zechus protects the city. That protects the city. If there's man the tzaddiks in the city, that city becomes a rich city, and it becomes a wealthy city, and becomes a central city, and it's a protected city. That when a tzaddik is in a city, he has an influence on the city. He protects the city.
That's what they said.
That is chus.
In Israel, when tzaddik was niftar, the kapara and supposed to have problems, and his kapara Hashem take him.
That's
the
a different
opposite,
thing. That's
but-
the opposite, but that's
Yeah.
not what we're talking about. That's the opposite. That's fakir. Now there is a shpor from a tzaddik when he teaches people. He teaches people. Who was here Shabbos, was very rowdy by the Kiddush, but before I was here Shabbos, and before Shabbos, an hour before Shabbos, Shmuley Stern comes upstairs with his mother. They had a baby girl, and they made Kiddush, a big simcha. The couple waited 18 years to have a child.
Wow.
18 years they had a child?
18 years. That's their second child.
What did it?
That's a simcha.
Oh, you didn't know that?
So,
No wonder they had all these fancy
So the mother comes upstairs and we're talking. She says her maiden name. It turns out my wife and Shmuli's mother grew up in the same bedroom. Same bedroom.
Bedroom?
Yeah, my parents-in-law bought their house. His Zaidi was a chazan in Yeshiva Crown Heights. I remember my shred always say, "Oh, we bought it from Chazan Lobel," and he said, his mother said, "Yeah, my name is Lobel." So yeah, she grew up. She said, "Oh, well, the simchas were in that house. I grew up in that house. My parents sold the house when I was getting married, and they moved to Eretz Yisrael." So she said, "I want to tell you a story." She said that her older sister learned Yeshiva Crown Heights. They had a friend. And the friend, Nebuch, the mother was an alamona. So the mother was working. Come home, the mother's not home. The mother asked the school if she can go home every day with another girl. So her mother, Mrs. Lobel, heard about this. She said, kid, I'll get and talk in another place. Let her come to my house every night. They would come home with, the two girls would come home from school, have supper in her house, and her mother would come whenever she came. She was waiting for her mother. Good. Matzah Shabbos, she said they would go to that woman's house to watch TV. That was but it was like all week, that was like she paid back. But all week, the girl would come back. They'd learn the same class, Yeshiva Crown Heights. They come back, 439 Sterling Street. That's my shvez's house. Okay. The girl was 12 years old, and her mother noticed that she's walking. Something's odd. So she told the almona, I think there's a problem with your daughter. Maybe you should go to a doctor. So the almona was really upset. She said, I have enough tzoros. Please don't talk to me about such things. So Mrs. Lobel said, look, you know what? Maybe we should go to Lubavitcher Rebbe. So she agreed. She asked a few neighbors if they can organize something. And they arranged the Yechidus with the Rebbe. Mrs. Lobel took this lady. They came to 770 with the daughter. As soon as they came in, the Rebbe said she has a problem with her back. The Rebbe named a condition. The Rebbe said she probably needs a surgery. She'll be in a cast for 2 years. The Rebbe says, but I guarantee you afterwards you're going to be gesund and you'll have a family. Don't worry about it. Everything will be good. The Rebbe gave them a name of a doctor. It was was impossible to get an appointment with this guy. But since they got the name, they got the referral from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, the doctor was willing to see them. And the Rebbe said, come back to me when you are healed. So they went to the doctor. They got the referral from the Rebbe, so the doctor agreed to see them. And it was the same diagnosis that the Rebbe gave. He agreed to do the surgery. And Baruch Hashem, everything went well. As she was in a cast, after she was healed completely, she came back to the Rebbe. The Rebbe said, you had a big miracle, and the Rebbeinu Shalom helped you, and he gave you life. You have to give back something to the Rebbeinu Shalom. What are you going to do for the Rebbeinu Shalom? So she said, I'm going to be a teacher. I'm I'm going to teach Jewish children. I'll be a Hebrew school teacher. The Rebbe was very happy. Said, okay, that's good. Deal. So she got married, and her husband was getting a doctorate. That was somewhere in Connecticut or in Boston, whatever. A short time after they get married, Miss Lobel gets a call. She had a baby, and a baby boy. What do we do for a bris? Lubavitch will take care of it. Kachava, Lubavitch took care of the bris, and she said this woman lives now in New Jersey. I forgot. She told me the name. And she said that they're a very wealthy family, a big balei tzedakah, but her whole life she was a Hebrew school teacher. Because she told the Rebbe that she's going to be a Hebrew school teacher. The Rebbe said you have to get back to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So you see, when a tzaddik is that they were not, I see when my father-in-law told me the Lobels, I never knew that they had such a beautiful story of a nes that happened with the Rebbe. But that's the way, when a tzaddik is in a city, he has an influence on the people of the city. She didn't become a Lubavitcher Hasidah. And so I think they're modern Orthodox or, but she's a frum woman, and she's a Hebrew school teacher, the way she promised. She was a Hebrew school teacher, teaching Yiddish Kinderlach Teures Hashem Tamim. Wow. So when there is two things of a tzaddik. There is, the tzaddik is in a city, so his zechus protects the city, and there is the influence that the tzaddik has on the city. The Medrash says the zechus of one tzaddik, the zechus of two tzaddikim, the zechus of three tzaddikim. Rashi never says a word about zechusim. The Medrash is talking about the zechus of a tzaddik that protects the city. So how could, the Medrash says, how could you say vayeitzei? That's it. The zechus of the city left. Yitzchak, Rivka, they're big tzaddikim. There's still major protection to the city. So the Medrash says, you're right, but still 3 tzaddikim is different than 2 tzaddikim. And Rashi is talking about a different thing. And Rashi is not talking about the protection of a tzaddik. And Rashi is talking about the influence of a tzaddik. Now, it's true. What you said, Mr. Rana said, is true. Rashi says, just in a few more psukim, Lekei Avraham, Lekei Yitzchak. Eibush is not miyachet Shmuel tzaddikim unless they passed away. But Yitzchak, he was koli b'bayis, he was locked in the house. It was choshev kemeis. It was as if he was already passed on. Yeah. So therefore, he had no influence on the city. And his wife, first of all, called Kvuda Bas Melech Pnimit. And secondly, she was very busy. Her husband was an invalid, so she was taking care of him. So she was busy taking care of her husband. I was just by my grandmother. I slept 3 hours last night. My Zayda Konan Hora is an elderly person. Yeah. I told my Zayda today that that the kids have a problem. I can't with the kids. The kids have a shaila for him. The Rebbe Rashab, when he was a little boy, he cried to his grandfather. He said, "How come the Eibishter revealed himself to Avram and not to us?" So Tzemach Tzedek said, when a Yid at the age of 99 decides to malzich, to do a bris milah, he's worthy that the Eibishter should reveal himself to him. So I said to my Zayd, the kids want to know what's the pshat. But I don't know, I'm only 42. So we're looking for a man who's 99. My Zayd is 99. So he had a good laugh. But my mother complains. She says, last night I slept 3 hours. What do you want? She's allowed to take care of him. So Yitzchak is not having influence on the city. Rivka is taking care of Yitzchak. She's not having influence on the city. So if you're talking about the tzaddik, the way he has an influence on the city, then there's a big difference in the city. The whole thing went out of the city. Now we could look 1 second at the details of the Lashonos, how it's different than Rashi and in the Medrash. Rashi says 3 things. Rashi says, Hu hoida, hu ziva, hu adora. What are the 3 things? So the Mefarshim have a lot of pshatim, but the Rebbe says in Pshuta Shel Mikra, what's hodor? The pasuk says v'hadarta pnei zaken. Hadarta means you should give kavod to a zaken. Hodor means kavod. It's when a city has a tzaddik, he's the kavod. If you have a landmark in the city, you have the museum that has incredible pictures, valuable pictures. And New York boasts that it has so many museums, so many landmarks, so many famous people that live here. So the city will boast to say the hodor, the kovid of a city, is that it has a choshev person living in the city. The president lives in D.C. That's why it's a choshev a city. Then there's ziv. What's the ziv of a city? The ziv is a shine. Ziv Hashemesh, a light. The tzaddik gives out a light. He teaches mitzvahs and ma'asim tovim and anhogas tovus to the people in the city. That ziv. What's hoid? Again, it's a pasuk. It says, "V'nasata mehoidcha alav," that Moshe Rabbeinu had a hoid coming out of his face. It was such a shine of light that it was necessary to put a mask on his face because it was so powerful. So the Eibusha said, "Pnei Moshe p'nei Chama, pnei Yeshua Kilavona," that give from your shine to him. And the Yidden was Vayiru Megeshes Elov. The Yiddish Shemayim was coming out of his face. It was terrifying. He had to put a mask on his face. The sun, you're not terrified from the sun. We enjoy the sun. If it's a nice day, we go out and we enjoy the sun. It gives you vitamin D, right? But if you look at Moshe's face, you get burnt. You don't get vitamin D. It was too much. So Ziv is a small ray of light. Hoid is a strong light. It's an overpowering light. The whole city gets a little bit of ashpa of the tzaddik. The city becomes more refined, especially the ones that are learning Torah and close to the tzaddik. They see the face of the tzaddik. They're zoich to get the hoid, karne hoid of Moshe Rabbeinu. So that's what Rashi's saying. Rashi's saying that when it's man shat tzaddik ba'ir. So what happens? Who hoid? He's the hoid of the city. Even the people that don't sit right in front of him and get his hoid, at least who's ziva. He gives out a ray of light. And even the people that don't get the ray of light, they don't learn from the Mai, but at least they boast. They say, "Oh, I live. Where do I live? I live in Beersheba. What's Beersheba? You don't know. The Tzaddik Hador. Yitzchak lives in Beersheba. Yaakov lives in Beersheba." So that's what Rashi says, and that's why Rashi says different. The Medrash doesn't say hoid. He says ziv and hodor, but not hoid. Hoid is the strong influence that the Yiddish Shemayim, that the tzaddik gives, because the Medrash is talking about the zechus of the tzaddik, and Rashi is talking about the influence of the tzaddik. Again, that's what the Medrash has to say. He left, but there's another two tzaddikim. But the zechus of one tzaddik, or three tzaddikim, is different. But in Rashi, the kasha doesn't begin in Rashi. Now we can understand also the difference between Rashi in the Chumash and the Rashi in Rus. The Rashi in Rus and Rashi in Chumash is talking about a different thing. The Rashi in Chumash is, as we said, the Rashi is talking about the influence that a tzaddik has in the city. One of the things that's very different than Rashi in Rus and Rashi in the Chumash, Rashi says in the Chumash that this is the story of Vayeitzei min hamokim ha'omor b'Naomi v'Rus. But he doesn't say that in the by Rus, because the truth is Vayeitzei singular. We're not talking about Rus b'chlal. We're talking about the general story. When Rashi is talking about in the Pirush Arish on Rus, Amigilus Rus, he doesn't say Ha'omar B'Naomi V'Rus, because they're not really talking about Rus. But the general story is talking about Rus. There's a very big difference between Naomi and Rus. What's the difference? Naomi was a tzaddikus, maybe. We don't know exactly. Probably she was the grandmother of Mashiach Tzidkenu, right? And she went out of Eretz Yisrael. That was a bad thing. That wasn't a Kiddush Hashem. It was a Chilul Hashem. But it wasn't her fault. It was her husband that schlepped her. What should she do? To say that she had an influence on the people of Moav, why would she have? First of all, she's a woman. Nebach, Tzoris, no end. Kol Kvudavas Belach Pnimen. No one
Jews there.
Yeah, who's she having an influence? Rus, on the other hand, she's having a very big influence. As Rashi says in the second Rashi Megillus Rus, Efrosim, so Rashi says, they were Anoshim Chshuvim, Egloin Melech Moav married off his daughter, Rus, to a Jewish family because they were very important people. Could you imagine what kind of tumult there was in the whole Moav when Rus decided that she wants to become a Jewess? A großer tumult. So if you're talking about the Ashpo of a tzaddik as protection, Naomi is great for that. And that's what Rashi is talking about when he talks in Megillus Rus. And that's why he doesn't repeat himself. Bizman shat tzaddik, hu hoida, hu ziva, hu ador. It's not the way. Naomi was not having an influence on the people in the city. It's just that when she went away, her protection of the city was removed. That's what Rashi's talking about in Rus. But Rashi, when he's talking here, he's talking about the general story, not only Naomi. Naomi Verus, the Rus, her ashpa in the city was not just her tzidkis. She was not yet a tzedekis even. I mean, she wasn't Megayah yet. It was just that the positive influence she had on people was enormous. She was the Bas Melech, and she decided she wants to be Jewish. So now that she left the city, her influence, she went away. Okay, so it was it was the top of the news. Like now, France is the top of the news. Another 3 days, it'll be bananas and chocolate. New cycle moves around. So when she was in Moav, she had a profound influence. So she was Hoida Ziva Vadora from the city. When she went away, the influence, the Hoid, was removed. So now we have Neicha. Now we understand that Rashi, the difference of Rashi and the Medrash, and the difference of Rashi al Torah, and the Rashi and Rus. But again, it comes down to this one point, that there's two things that Tzaddik gives out to the city. There's the protection, and there is the influence. And the Medrash is talking about the protection, the Zechus, like the Medrash emphasizes, Zechus shel Tzaddik, Zechus shel Shnei Tzaddikim, and Rashi is talking about the influence. That's why the Medrash doesn't talk about the Hoid, but the Rashi talks about the Hoid, because that's important. Hoid is like Moshe Rabbeinu, the Hoid. It gave Yidu Megeshes Elav. It gave very strong influence on the people around him. So again, Rashi is talking about the influence that a tzaddik has on the people. That's why Yaakov was the only one that had influence, because Yitzchak and Rivka was Koli Babayis, and they had no influence. But the Medrash is talking about the Zechus. The schus, sure, they had a very big schus. He was a tzaddik ador. It was bigger than Yaakov in his day. So therefore, the Medrash has a big question.
What's more important, the schut or the influence?
Well, each one we're talking about a different thing. There's the schus and the influence. We're not judging one to the other. Rashi's talking about the influence, and the Medrash is talking about the schus. Before we go, the Erechaim HaKodesh, just to finish off, the Erechaim HaKodesh says, Veyetzey Yankim Be'esheva. Be'esheva is that they give a shvur to the neshama before it goes out to this world. And there's a shvur, and then Vayelech Charona comes down to this world, Charon Afshal Mokem Ba'olam. And every neshama goes out. So the Rashi said, Zok the Rebbe, the Rashi's question is, what's the big deal? That the main thing is the Vayelech Charona, but vayeitzei Yaakov and Be'esheva, that's not the big deal. The answer is that's also a big deal. And the neshama has oiz, hoid, oiz, hodor. It sees the beauty of the Eibishter and it agrees to go away. Why does the neshama agree to go away? Because the neshama knows that dafke, when you go down to Choron, that's where you're going to be successful. Just like by Yaakov Avinu, when he came to Choron, which is the worst place in the world, yet that's where he got married and that's where he had his children. So same thing, every neshama knows that it's kedai, vayeitzei, even though we're going to lose pana hoida, pana ziva, pana adora, neshama loses its beautiful geshmak that it has, being in Gan Eden. The neshama agrees for all this to vayelech charana. It agrees not only to go to Choron, but to go out of Be'esheva, Abi, to do the tachlis of to make the world a dira b'tachtonim, because dafka then, the Yid Zoiche, v'shafte b'sholem al beis avi, v'hoya Hashem alekim, and the Gula amitas v'ashlema, yedem Mashiach tzidkeinu.
One question. It says Yaakov was a man in the tents, so what do you mean Yitzchak and Rivka were inside and Yaakov was outside? Well, how was he outside? He was a man of tents.
He was a man of tents, true.
And he studied.
But still, true. He studied with others also.
And Yitzchak didn't?
The other guy, Yitzchak, was stuck in the house. He was blind. It's hard for him to teach other people. He was